Hello again. I've been looking through some old photographs I took on the island of Iona some years ago now, and the story goes that in 563 a wicker coracle covered with leather left Ireland with St. Columba and 12 companions, and on the eve of Pentecost landed just off the west coast of Scotland, at a place we now know as the island of Iona. And the first thing Columba did on arriving was to use the pebbles and boulders strewn around the shore to build a large stone cross. And then after that he set to and built himself a monastery where he was to spend the rest of his life. And some years ago I, with others, made a journey to Iona, spent a couple of weeks there, located in the Western Isles of Scotland. The group was led by Dr. Philip Newell, who has spent a lifetime researching and learning about Celtic spirituality, that is, the prayers and worship of the early Christians in this land. Iona remains a beautiful place, sometimes wild, often tranquil, and a place where God feels close by. For these reasons, Iona has become a refuge for the saints and a place of pilgrimage today. On the coast of Scotland and Ireland, there are certain sites and places that locals call thin places. Iona is a thin place, not so named because the altitude is any higher or the air is any thinner there. Rather, they are called thin because it is believed that in these places the distance between heaven and earth shrinks, and the veil between the two worlds is so thin you can actually perceive something of heaven itself. And this time of the year, All Saints' Tide, might be described as a thin time of the year, a time when we remember and feel close to our loved ones who have departed from this life, and the great saints and martyrs who have blazed the trail for the faith. I wonder whether you have experienced these thin places in your life, places where the veil between heaven and earth seems somehow transparent and thin, places where you have a sure sense that you are standing on holy ground, places where at this time of the year perhaps you feel close to the saints who have gone before. Jesus knew about thin places. He often sought the hilltop, the desert, or a garden like the one at Gethsemane, for instance, places away from the crowds. He went to thin places to pray and to feel close to God. And standing at St. Columba's Bay, the place where St. Columba is thought to have first landed, gazing out upon the white surf rolling over a pebbled shore and the expanse of sea on all sides, ever-changing and yet ever constant, one can sense how the early saints who have gone before us experienced God's mystical presence there. Although the Celts in Britain, Ireland and Brittany practiced their faith hundreds of years ago, their faith still has a direct relevance for us today, especially so as we place increased value on our environment and ecosystem, and as we acknowledge climate change and form climate accords. We are part of the web of life, and our existence and well-being depend upon it. And the early Celtic Christians understood this, and is reflected in their spiritual life and worship. They prayed and worshipped while they worked in the fields and farmed the land, milked the cows, gathered seaweed, caught fish, and gave food to the poor. For the Celts, their faith and their environment were in harmony. God's presence was close, and especially in those thin places. And isn't Jesus himself a thin place? Doesn't his life and death and resurrection guide us to holy ground, to a place where the boundaries between this world and the world to come fade away, and where through Jesus Christ we sense our unity with God and all the saints who dwell with God in glory? A prayer of St. Columba. Be, O Lord, a guiding star above me, a smooth path below me, a kindly shepherd behind me, and a bright flame before me, today, tonight, and forever. Amen.
The fiercest drought and storm, what heights of love, what depths of peace, when fears are still.